A victory for hardworking Canadians. I'm Brian Lilly with TheRebel.media. It was a Canada Day present for workers across the country, one the NDP and the Liberals promised to take away if either one of them wins the next election. Yes, as most people were signing off for the workday on Tuesday, getting ready for the Canada Day holiday, senators were actually working. They were voting. On what? Well, on a trio of private members' bills, most importantly, in my view, Bill C-377. This is the union disclosure bill. Yes, senators working at 4:30 the day before a national holiday. It's shocking. And if you listen to the mainstream media, the media party, the guys that didn't get a vote on this bill but desperately wanted one, well, this bill was passed with draconian measures, draconian maneuvers, because a group of Conservative MPs used the rules to their advantage and found a way to force a vote on this bill before they left for the summer. See, the Liberals in the Senate, yes, there are still Liberals there, despite what Justin Trudeau will tell you, well, they wanted to delay a vote on Bill C-377 to essentially kill it. Under Senate rules, as long as any senator says they want to speak to a private member's bill at any future date, well, you simply can't vote on the bill. Essentially, the Liberals and a couple of Conservatives were trying to delay this bill with procedural maneuvers. Well, the Conservatives appealed to the Speaker, who is a Conservative, but he sided with the Liberals. And so the majority of Conservatives used their own procedural maneuver to overrule the Speaker and force a vote. That is the draconian measure, the same one that the Liberals used in 2009, back when they still had a majority in the upper house. The Conservatives didn't break the rules. They used the rules as written to get something done. But this bill, it still needs more study. It shouldn't have been passed, they'll tell you. No, not really. Let's look at some facts. More than 930 days sitting in the Senate. I've had two committees look at it in the Senate, the Legal Committee and the Banking Committee. There's been 21 hours of committee testimony and review, 72 witnesses, and countless hours of debate. That doesn't count the debate and the witnesses in the House of Commons side. This bill is being described as anti-union, including by media folks like the unionized Rosemary Barton at CBC.
What does what you've just explained there, say about the Senate? The fact that
it's not an independent body.
Well, or the fact that they got that anti-union bill through, because I think that's the adequate way to describe it, right? It's clearly trying to expose unions and their finances, and that they did it that way.
Except it isn't anti-union, unless you mean that it's bad for union bosses. The MPs and senators heard lots from union bosses during the study of this bill, and union bosses are universally against it because it will force the unions that collect billions of dollars tax-free with the full force of the law behind them, to disclose how they spend the money. So the union bosses don't like it. They don't want their six-figure salaries and perks made public, and they spoke out time and again. But MPs and senators also heard from union members who supported the bill, like Francis Donovan, a man I interviewed on Sun News, who very much supports his union and the union movement, but still had to take his union to court to get access to how his dues money was spent. The NHL Players Association was invoked several times as a reason to reject the bill, even though their members have actually had to take their executive to court to get access to how union funds were being spent. And they heard from a person named Mark Rumi. He's an articulate Air Canada employee and CUPE member who described the lengths he had to go to find out basic information he says should have been readily available.
They say that they are constitutionally mandated to provide financial information to people like me. My national president is Paul Moist. In his criticism of 377, he wrote, and I quote, "CUPE members set our priorities and we provide full disclosure of our operating expenses and our activities to those members." That has not been my experience. I will now review the realities I have witnessed so that the record is corrected. At local union meetings, a financial statement would be handed out. At the beginning of my career, we would keep it. In the last 6 years, each copy was numbered and we were required to hand them back in. That is not disclosure. There is no practical way to study them. There is no way to go over them with others.
Unions in Canada have special protections in the law. Like I said, they collect billions of dollars tax-free. They want the rest of us to pay more tax, but they get their money tax-free. Now, some would argue that churches and other charities, they get that deal, but churches and other charities don't have the law, the force of law behind them, forcing me to give. If I don't put enough in the collection basket at church, I don't get my pay docked. There are no court rulings saying I've got to pay dues, I've got to tithe and help pay for the political actions of the church. But there are for unions. In fact, the law actually says that in exchange for the tax-free status of charities, that charities have to refrain from being overly political. No such restrictions on unions, none at all. Workers have long complained about dues money going to politics. Court rulings have said they don't have the right to opt out and that they must pay, even if the funds are used for things that go against their beliefs and have nothing to do with negotiating a contract. So workers asked for more transparency, and now with the passage of 377, they can get it. But Trudeau wants to shut that down. He doesn't want them to have it. Here's part of the statement he put out shortly after the bill passed. Quote, "I'm deeply disappointed that Stephen Harper's Conservative senators have rammed through Bill C-377, a direct attack on Canadian workers and an attempt to weaken Canada's labour movement. A Liberal government is firmly committed to repealing this deeply ideological and highly partisan legislation." Highly partisan. Which leader took hundreds of thousands and thousands of dollars anyway from unions? That'd be Trudeau. Bill C-377 is not an attack on workers. Like I said, maybe on union bosses, but not on workers. And yet Trudeau and Mulcair say they'll take away this active disclosure. At a time when the public wants more transparency, more openness, demands audits of MPs and senators, Trudeau and Mulcair promise to protect union bosses. But they should know better. They're both from Quebec, where the province was rocked by a corruption scandal that saw politicians go to jail and union insiders tell the story of close ties between organized labor and organized crime. Here's how the Globe and Mail reported on part of the testimony of Ken Pereira, a whistleblower who worked his way up inside his union only to find out the union was controlled by the mob. Quote, "When a biker strip club named the 1035 burned down in Chambly, a Montreal suburb, the union bosses helped rebuild, even investing $1 million into it from the FTQ Construction Investment Fund." If you don't think the same thing's happening across the country, well, you've got another thing coming. It has happened, it is happening. I'm not saying every union is dirty, not every union leader is corrupt, but this is happening elsewhere. And union members and those that pay the dues deserve to know. If unions want to keep their special status, their billions collected tax-free, their protected nature, then they should open their books. And that's what this bill requires. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. We know the unions need it. The question is, why do Mulcair and Trudeau want to protect the union bosses?